Good afternoon. I hear an echo.
Try now.
Yeah, I hear an echo, but I'm sure it's just me. Right. Thank you very much, and Chair, for inviting me to do this short presentation. After this morning, I actually think, and I took out some slides because I don't think we need to repeat so many things. But I will try to interpret the code for best practice, not just as journal editor, but also as a reviewer and an author and a reader of journals in our country and elsewhere. So I begin by just dipping into the title of the principles, which is the first part of the code. And I'm not going to repeat all of that. You all know it very well by now. But for fun, I made just of the principles, I made a word cloud. And being in linguistics, it hit me that the word must is really prominent, and reference and authors and authorship. So I thought I would just contemplate for a moment why we call this the fundamental principles. Because in my understanding of the English language, fundamental and principles have a relationship. So I was just wondering whether we should say fundamental principles or just principles, because principles, I guess, are in essence fundamental. And when I read the policy again, I realized that as editors, authors, reviewers, readers, we have really good policy. I mean, I don't think we can improve on the policy as it stands. It is clear, it is concise, it is workable, it is written in an accessible English for new reviewers, new authors, and also for new editors, which is one of our big problems in the journals that I've been working with. Finding an editor who has the time to invest in this, who gets recognition for it in whatever institution she may work, that is another matter. So the process, I think, is our biggest problem. And I'm not talking about the process of getting to reviewers, looking at reviews, evaluating the final decision from all points of view. That is obvious to all of us in this audience. We are so used to this already. But what bothered me most, and that is why I encircled it like a typical teacher would in red and quite squiggly, is the governance of all of this. And it's been referred to, and in some of the talk this morning, alluded to, not directly referred to, that the governance of everything from the DHET and ASAF and the special unit and the publishers and the home-based journals and the journals and the institutions, in all of these, I don't think we see eye to eye about the governance, even though the policy is clear on it. I think when it comes to practice that we stumble. Yet we have all this advice, which is in the policy, and we all try to adhere to the COPE's advice in all documents. This advice is there, but here's my problem, and maybe this is the thing. The governing bodies, from departments at universities to centers, to faculties, to universities, and to everybody else, I don't think the actual time, energy, and expertise needed to work with this is clear to everybody, or that we in any way share this same page and some other pages. The process itself, I'll come back to the governance. I cannot repeat this enough. At our journal currently, we have a huge reviewer pool. But whenever I want to pull up a reviewer, I notice, because our publisher has a very good system, that this reviewer has already been used twice this year. Clearly, I cannot do that to everybody, so I must look for new reviewers. And so I start searching on the internet, go to universities, call friends, and it takes up so much time, but also so much discernment. How do I know that I can trust this reviewer unless I've also checked what she's written so far? So a reviewer pool is, I think, the most valuable investment that a journal can have. But it is also the most difficult one, because we have to respect our reviewer pool and we have to trust them, but respect them and honor them. And I really like the idea of awarding some prize to the reviewer that did the best job this year, although that would be a difficult choice, I can assure you. The turnaround time from reviewers. I feel I have to complain a bit. It's the nature of the beast of being an editor, that how does it happen that you sometimes have to find 12 reviewers and you have to wait some time for the requested reviewers to say no thank you or to ignore you to carry on. This is a very difficult thing, and why I'm mentioning this and the reviewer pool is that I don't think the governance at all levels realize what it takes. In terms of the ethics, that's the joyful thing. I'm going back. That's the joyful thing about where we are in our community, in our country, and elsewhere in the world. Much more attention is being paid to ethics, to research ethics. I'm not sure about publication ethics, and I'm sure it will be discussed at length tomorrow. And so in terms of governance in the policy and the process of the work that we try to do in publishing, I don't think employers give enough attention to how much time their employees, if the journal is based at a university or some institution, how much time they need to do this work. Fortunately, where I work, it becomes part of your job description and it is taken into account. So I took out a couple of slides of things that have been discussed this morning. And so because I work in research in childhood education, I see the editorial and production governance as a happy team holding hands. That is how we would like it to be. And once again, I say, it is very, very hard to do if you walk alone. A couple of years ago, when I first approached Ms. Veldsman at ASSA for some help, we had a home industry with a new journal in 1997. We got hold of an organization and a private server, and we got going because, of course, one has to be served on the internet. Then we moved to a university server, which worked extremely well until it didn't. And now it is being, as far as I know, very well resuscitated. We also moved to print with open access, which was a very difficult combination because it's expensive on both accounts. And then we moved finally to an open access publisher, and it is well known for its good service. It is also known that the page fees and the handling fees are quite high. But fortunately, in our case, and I don't think it's the case for many, many of our journals, we have a reserve fund at our institution to assist authors who really struggle or who do not work at a South African institution where they can be given the advantage of a sum of money to pay for the page fees. So I'm wondering, these little models that we have been through in the two journals that I've worked with, what what makes Frontiers so different? Yes, it's an exceptional business model, and we have to congratulate the woman who founded it. They have peer review, but they declare the peer reviewers. Isn't that the ultimate wish for real open science? And now, with your permission, I would like to switch to aspects of the policy that I highlighted. And for that, I would have to return here. Please let me know if this screen is shared.
At the moment, Elizabeth, we see a slide headed "A Predicament for Journals, Publisher or Home Industry." Or Home-Based System. No, I'm not seeing anything new.
Yes, I will redo the...
Yes, unshare your screen and then share again.
Yes. I'm sorry for that delay.
No problem. Zoom will get the hang of this sometime soon.
This is somewhat frustrating for you, I know. And,
no, I think it's important to see the material that you have. So I think unshare your screen, right? That looks good.
Yeah.
Yep, now share.
And now I will share again, yes.
Yes.
I hope you see it now.
Not yet, but the electrons, now we see Code of Best Practice in Scholarly.
That's it.
Right.
This is what I did when I worked through the Code of Best Practice. I first summarized what I thought may be something to address, and then eventually I took a shortcut. I enlarged the print, the font, so that one can see it, and then I highlighted some issues like this, which I've already referred to. I'm not sure we have to say fundamental principles. And then this is another one I was worried about. How does an editor, no matter how much you know of the field, and the reviewers, how much they know of the field, and considering the time they have at their disposal to investigate, how do we know that inconsistent data have been omitted? I think we need to address that at some point. I try my best because I'm quite a sleuth, but I can only do it up to a point. And also I have one assistant who's very good with this. So look up the PhD on which this is based, or look at the master's dissertation at the university repositories. But it's not always so easy because not all universities do that. So I also thought I should mention the habit of most of the submissions we receive, most of the manuscripts. They don't do this one. They do not refer to the original research and the later research. They just take what the latest information is on their Scholar Google search. I think this is something that should be taken up. I don't quite know where. I really like the definition of authorship as COPE defines it. And I'm concerned about this aspect. And here, if there's a moment, yeah, I see there is. I have a little anecdote. Recently, two colleagues and I submitted a really long report for a government agency. And one of the authors was not a scholar and participated in the practical research, and we included this person in as an author. And there were many exchanges about the validity and integrity of that move. I do believe that we need to also then maybe interrogate this term. This I find because we have in our country the system of subsidy. And by the way, my colleagues, if there are new colleagues from countries and institutions with whom we collaborate, they always say, what's this with you and the subsidy? Why do we have to claim money for research that we've published? And so we explain, that we encourage, especially young researchers and so on and so on. But it is important for the subsidy purposes that the period of the study is mentioned in clearly with regard to the present situation. I don't think that's always done. I didn't have any highlights in the editorial process. It's pretty standard and very clearly written. I really am going to use this in the shadowing of future editors, which is what we try to do because it's hard to find new editors. And then in terms of the editorial policy, this is something that I think if one doesn't work with a publisher, and as we worked originally in the first journal that I edited, which is very difficult because one has to safely store all the information. Assistance and administrative help at universities change. Even the university itself changes its repository. And so I think there one has to pay attention to where are the records, because in only 2 cases in all these years, we were on the brink of litigation because of the argument of an author or 2. And luckily we had the evidence, recent evidence I could draw from our publishers, very meticulous recording. And I also think, and I'm not sure, I'm asking the question now because I know we have people with much more experience in this. When Web of Science receives the application to move from the emergent category to the real category of impact-based research journals, I wonder, do they have access to the communications? Because when I get to a tricky decision as an editor, I go back to the email correspondence and to the events that have been listed. And that always gives me the answer that I'm looking for. So I'm just wondering what I would have done in the home industry phase of my own life as an editor if I didn't have all this at the tips of my fingers. Yes, this report, I think at the editorial home of a journal, but also if there is a publisher with the publisher, this annual report is crucial. And I was very pleased when the review was done by ASIF and on which John reported this morning. I was very glad that we had all of these evidence at hand and that our faculty, where the journal is based, insists on having full report of everything. And that includes also, we had a grant from the DHET and its European Union collaboration for a couple of years to support our journal. And luckily there we had to report on every iota of what we did, not only what it cost, but also how much capacity development did we do. And I think that is the note that I would almost like to end on, and that is that we used to call ourselves in the South African Journal of Childhood Education a developmental journal, in the sense that our primary aim was to develop new authors and reviewers and so on. I think that period has passed and that we are maybe not mature, but we are in late adolescence as a journal. I think that effort for South Africans like ASIF and the South African Journal of Science have been doing so beautifully should be a model for all the journals. Yeah. Of course, this is a given, but it's also a hard one to find as, and I mean, it's about the third time I'm mentioning it in this talk, but where I work, the journal work is regarded as part of the weighting of one's job load. And that is why when I asked earlier this morning, if an editorship should move from its first institution to another one, how will all of this work? Because our research vice dean has often said to me, so how's it with your journal? You know, how's it, what are you doing? What are your problems? Because there's someone that is looking after me as an editor in a faculty or in a university. And I think we must be very careful with thinking that editors are roaming people. I would plead for an editor to have a home base. For instance, should our journal move, it should move lock, stock, and barrel to a place where we know it will be safe, not just in terms of the intellectual and practical experience of the editor, but of the institutional backup that the journal will have. So I'm pleading for that as an older editor. I am not sure about the double blind anymore. I think it could be double or triple or quadruple open so that we know, because sometimes it is better to know and it is more conducive to scholarship development. Thank you for your patience. I hope we get some good discussion from this.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that was a nicely provocative session, so many thanks there. I have a comment from Clinton van der Merwe. Clinton, would you like to say something? Okay, so Clinton's comment is, as a reviewer, I want at least 4 weeks or more to review the paper. We are busy people and our time and commitments need to be respected. Your comment, Professor Elizabeth?
I agree. And although there's an automatic, beautifully AI'd algorithm at our publisher, I change the dates as often as I can, because I think 4 weeks is a good one. And as a reviewer, I appreciate that. And then also as a reviewer, when after the designated time, I have not responded and they write to me, I write to the editor and say, can I have another 2 or 3 days? And then the editor will say, okay. So I think everybody is extremely busy. And that's why I said earlier on, respect and honor for our reviewers and our pool of reviewers is primary for me.
Great. There is a comment from Clinton van der Merwe to say we need more editors like you, Professor Henning. And I did see applause from Vickers van Zyl as well. So I would like to check whether there's anything further in the chat. I see no hands raised. Now, there is a system called Publons, which I think, if I'm correct, recognizes the time that reviewers spend so that it can, if necessary, be incorporated into a key result area evaluation or assessment. Do you have any comments on that?
Oh, yes, I think all aspects of a journal should be considered. I mean, really all aspects of a journal, not just the quality and the number of published articles per annum. For sure. While I have a gap, if I may.
Please go ahead.
You know, when the discussion that Carol Bertram started about the 75-25% and then per issue, online rolling publications have only 1 issue per volume. And I think that solves most of the problem. Unless there is a special rolling issue, there's, well, the online journals that I know have one issue, and we copied when we moved to a fully online open access. We copied the model of the American Educational Research Association's journal, Open ARA. Thank you.
Great. Carol Bertram, would you like to come online and ask your question? I think it's a question of the audience, but please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just really interesting. I mean, LBU, it's fantastic that the editorship is located within your workload. I'd be really interested to know from editors how much that is the case. Certainly at my university, that's not the case. And it does feel that a huge amount of this editing work and then even reviewing work, I don't know, it's supposed to come from some other, who knows where. Yeah, I think we're all under this, you know, this kind of neoliberal university of ours that, you know, counts the number of students you graduate, the number of students you teach, et cetera, but these kinds of things around capacity building and editing, I don't know how we push back as academics, but certainly I'm in a situation where after kind of doing this for 5 years, I kind of feel like I just can't do it anymore. So I'd be interested to know what other editors, if it is the case that other universities do actually recognize that. Thanks.
Thank you. Before you reply, Elizabeth, may I ask Matabo Kao to come in on the same issue? Matabo, if you'd like to unmute and set your question.
Thank you very much. This is a very thorny issue because it is like once you accept to become an editor of a journal that is based within a faculty in a university, you have extra hours hiding somewhere in outer space that you can use for the editorship and following up on reviewers and ensuring that everything is done properly. It's not taken into the workload. And I really don't know how. It's discussed every year, but nothing is done. Do you have any tips on how we can get to the space where you are at, Prof. Henning, in terms of getting it recognized?
Over to you, Professor Henning.
I don't have any tips in the sense that if you do this, it's about university management, but it's also about the security of the journal. And so I think it's, you know, it's a personal view. I think we South Africans are great at accepting charity work. And the editor is, we are helping the community, we are publishing, we're developing young scholars, we're running workshops. But if you keep account of that, and that is what I did, maybe you can do that. I started keeping a logbook quite a couple of years ago. The logbook said Sunday date, because it was always on a Sunday when I had some time to work on the journal. And so I kept a logbook with dates and the actual hours of helping to edit a manuscript for a new author who was struggling, looking for reviewers. So I did a systematic, and I created it on my computer, a systematic logbook of what I did, because to say you're a journal editor, it's an all-inclusive concept. And then when I had too much work, I asked if we could use some of our research funding to appoint an associate editor, which we then did. And we paid her with some of the funds we got from DHET, because that helped a lot. But then when that funding ran out, and she had to once more become a volunteer who was not at our university, she said, I can't do it. So what I'm saying is I don't think editors need to be paid, but I think they need to keep a logbook and then show it to their line managers and as high up in the university as possible to say, this is what it entails. It's not an honorary position. It's a work position. Journalists get paid for their work. editors and reviewers need to also keep a real good record. And the colleague who said 4 weeks for review, I think we need to say, you know, on the curriculum vitae that come my way, I review 4 and then a list. That doesn't help very much. What helps is I reviewed 4 this journal, and this is how long it took me. And I think that's the type of necessary quantification that might help. Ms. Carl?
Thanks. Louise van Heerden, would you like to make a comment before I ask Professor Leslie Swartz to come in?
Yes, thank you, Eagle. Yes, we have found that the continuous publication does work well, especially with regards to the affiliations. Yes, and then authors don't have to wait so long to see their article published. So yes, I would certainly support that. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, so that's now publishing articles as they are available.
Thank you very much. Professor Swartz, would you like to come in?
Thank you. I mean, I guess since I put my hand up, there's been a whole lot in the chat, all of which I agree with. I mean, we're obviously all very exercised about the invisibility of what we do, and I'm sure that I'm not the only editor here who has found it. I've been editing, you know, journals for 30 years, and every year it seems to get harder and harder to find reviewers, and it's for exactly the same reason, is that these things are not measured. It's hidden care work for the academy, and I'm interested to see that in the chat there are people in my institution who have their editorial roles seen as part of their KPIs, and it's not seen as part of mine. And I think there's a broader sort of struggle. You know, somebody mentioned neoliberalism. Which I mean, I don't think we can deal with it in this meeting, but one of my concerns is that editing work, reviewing, working with students, all of these things are part of what we do to keep the academy going. And it's impossible to keep the academy going without these things, but all of these things are seen as kind of extras because they're not visible and not easily countable. So we really need, I mean, I'm not quite sure how to do it, but possibly some joint statement, a joint publication, actually stating what some of these issues are. You know, our own struggles with the invisibility of editing work, the difficulty to get people who to review and to review on time, and so on, because this is actually crucial. We have all the language of transformation and so on, but these are crucial issues for the maintenance and transformation of the academy. Thank you.
Yes. Perhaps before I ask Ina Smith whether you would like to make a comment, I could just say you may be aware of the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, yes, which does free us up from some of these things. Ina Smith, would you like to come online and just point out that you've made some comments on credits for reviewers and publons?
What I wanted to communicate was that there are tools to monitor and to report and record reviewer activities, especially if you're using OJS open journal systems like we do with Colista journals. Many of the journals today are using OJS. So yes, investigate and implement maybe and consider so that review activities can be recorded on a platform. Thank you, Ida.
Right. Hanley Moss, would you like to come in? You have a comment in the chat box.
Good afternoon. No, I'm just glad to hear that I'm not the only one struggling to buy some more hours in the 24 that we have available. Thanks.
Yes, I've had this experience too. Faiz Girdian, you have a comment about Stellenbosch University factors. Would you like to unmute and make your comment? It may be that you don't have a microphone available. What Faiz said was Stellenbosch University factors in my Pythagoras editorial role in my KPI metrics.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
very often one's looking for the button, right?
Yes, I
Welcome.
was. I'm a Teams man. Yeah. Now, Stellenbosch does that. We have a very elaborate Excel sheet that computes and computes and computes, and then you fill in the blanks, and then it spits out your score. And I know that I get my kudos for doing the hard work of keeping the journal afloat.
Right. Thank you. Radley
welcome.
Enrico? Radley Enrico, are you there?
Yes, many thanks, and thank you, colleagues. And Irvi, yes, I share the same sentiments. I found myself spending hours and hours, not only doing the admin, but doing the wherewithal that it takes to run the journal. And this is a most interesting, and I think it's a highly noteworthy issue that needs to be addressed. And I would like to find out more from Faiz Gideon in terms of exactly how Stellenbosch does it, and perhaps see to what extent I can persuade the law faculty at the University of the Western Cape to adopt a similar procedure, because currently it is, as far as I'm aware, it's not recognized as part of my teaching load as such. And the time taken as an editor cuts deeply and broadly into my teaching and my research load as a lecturer. Thank you.
Right. Bernadine Benson, you have a comment and a solution attached.
Hi, yes. So what I do is I negotiate at the beginning of the year, but my academic citizenship KPA only weighs 10%. So it's very, very tiny, but that gives me some room for movement. Yeah. But I hear all this, and our teaching load is just exploding. So it leaves just so much less time for editing. And we do this labor of love, and we usually do it at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, or as the one participant said, quickly between the rugby games. Yeah, but we do it as a labor of love. And if we don't do this, who's going to do it?
Yep. Neil Eccles, I love your comment. Would you like to put it out there if you unmute?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I think it's self-explanatory, I guess. I have a later comment too, so just to spare you from breaking in again. Yes. I mean, this feels a bit like a group therapy session for editors, yep, in a sense, and perhaps we should form a union to advance our cause in a collective sense around this. But I mean, it is just such an important endeavor. One thing that strikes me is that sometimes the work that is created is related to a whole lot of these bureaucratic structures which are put in place, I think, under a rubric of quality and to protect against sort of a lot of the malfeasance which is associated with journals and publishing and subsidy. And sometimes I think those control mechanisms become particularly burdensome. Some of the reporting requirements, some of the administrative requirements associated with these increasingly complicated control environments. But yeah, the struggle for the working day goes on. Thanks.
Right. Yes. I love the quote. From Gideon Else. Gideon, would you like to make a comment? Right. Susan, I think you're picking up that this particularly interesting point might lead to a statement of some kind. Would you like to elaborate?
well, not elaborate, perhaps just to respond, Igor, to say, yes, so yeah, on the side, between a lot of colleagues, we say, okay, right, I think that's what we need to do. It seems that our editor-in-chief from SOJS has some ideas already. So yes, I think we're committed to draw up a statement. Of course, it will be circulated to this group for your input, and then we can decide, you know, how will we issue this statement? Will we just publish it? And yes, and I suppose we can have a whole dissemination plan to whom the statement can go. Thank you, colleagues. This has been quite worthwhile, and thank you for raising that idea.
Thank you. Prof, yes, applause there from Busiswe Alant. From Professor Leslie Swartz, his comment is, should we discuss how to draft something from NSEF?
I think that's already been dealt with. Thank you.
Okay. And then Ina Smith, you remarked that reviewers can also earn continuing professional development points based on the review work done for journals. So I think that's a particularly interesting concept that can include scientists who are registered professional scientists. They need CPD points, and engineers, of course. And then Faiz, I think you are beginning the conversation with Radley, and you might exchange emails by clicking not on everyone at the bottom of the chat, but by finding each other on the chat. Teresa Dersuvite, I hope I have pronounced your name correctly. Would you like to unmute yourself and make your suggestion?
No, just supporting the idea of some kind of advocacy work around these issues of workload. But yes, I'm hearing that, you know, I'll be in full support of some kind of a statement, but I think that we need to almost lobby a little bit more actively around these issues with different management structures at universities across the country. It's just my 2 cents worth, nothing major.
It occurred to me that perhaps the people to start with are universities' research officers. I'm not sure if that's correct, but when it comes to a consensus among universities, I'm wondering whether getting the issue up to USAF, Universities South Africa, the meeting of vice chancellors, is a possible way of doing it. Right, I'm not seeing more hands, and I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. Is there anyone who would like to say something before I close this session?
Sorry, Igor, maybe I can just jump in here very quickly, and that is to say, I think the whole question about authorship is extremely important because predatory practices are also starting to arise around authorship. So I would really like to encourage editors to go and have a look at our 12-year report, where the whole issue of authorship was extensively discussed and what is it meant by that. And also then the tip for the idea from Professor Henning to say, one has to be very clear in your layout and design. Which author did what? And if it was somebody that operated a very specific microscope, for instance, that there's another place to actually put and to acknowledge the work of that particular operator of that microscope. So I just think one has to start getting a fay with these things that are very important, especially in the next round of the National Quality Framework. A lot of emphasis will be placed on what is being viewed as being predatory, unethical practices, because I think, as you know, in the South African case, it was not so much predatory, but really unethical practices actually came to the light. And authorship was one of those that was highlighted in our report at the time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So in the absence of any other comments, let me close what's been a very interesting session, raising some questions for NSEF that could possibly be discussed under the business items later. Now, thank you to the speakers for bringing these issues forward for discussion. The discussions were very useful. We meet again at 2:15 p.m. South African Standard Time. Could the speakers please check in a few minutes before to test slides and so on? I'm looking forward to the next session. It looks great, and thank you very much. Goodbye for now.